Matcave Gaming here for the next episode of Out of the Cave. We're going to continue our talk about the Resident Evil franchise. Last time we met, we talked about Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. That game became a fan favorite and certainly a big success in the franchise. So the next entry is the start of where I consider a little bit of confusion to happen. And by that I mean this is one of those series that strays from numbering the sequels and then somewhere along the way goes back to it and kind of creates some confusion as to why wasn't this called part whatever, why couldn't that just continue the trend? So we move from 1, 2, and 3 to Resident Evil Code Veronica. Not Resident Evil 4 Code Veronica, just Code Veronica. This entry initially released on the Sega Dreamcast. So now we've jumped from the PlayStation to the Sega Dreamcast, a whole new console, better graphics, high-res graphics, better sound capabilities, and network capabilities were built into this device as well. At the time when that game got announced, I'm already big into the series and knew, well, if I want to play the next one, I got to get a Dreamcast, which I did. And to this day, I still love my Dreamcast. It's one of those systems that I wish was more successful. I wish it lasted longer than it did because there really were some great games on that system. And it, to be honest, was a superior system to both the PlayStation and the N64. So the fact that it failed is rather unfortunate. So Resident Evil Code Veronica comes out on the Dreamcast. This time we're back to playing as Claire Redfield, one of the heroes from Resident Evil 2. It's been some time since Raccoon City has been completely destroyed, so obviously we're not there this time around. We come in to see Claire kind of invading a facility of some sort, and she ends up getting captured and put into a prison cell in this facility. It turns out it's on an island, and well, the prison is on the island. The facility, I think, was somewhere in Europe. I think that's where she invaded. And then she gets brought to a prison on an island, all run by the Umbrella Corporation. So she wakes up there and is not sure what's going on, but when she wakes up, she's told by a guard who's already injured, who's now letting her out of the cell, saying, just go, it doesn't matter, you're gonna die anyway. The island's been overrun by zombies. So there's been a virus breakout now on this island, and we don't know yet why it happened. So this game, again, keeps the core elements. The tank controls are there. You still have your quick turn from Resident Evil 3. Plenty of puzzles, getting keys to unlock doors, things like that. Everything is intact. The design of this game, though, upped the ante with the graphics. So the level of detail, especially when it came to gore and the way the zombies look, now we got to see a little more diversity in the zombies. You see more battle damage on them, just tissue falling off of them, body parts falling off, and it creates this more immersive experience. Now, Claire is well seasoned at this point. She survived Raccoon City, so she's far tougher than she even was in Resident Evil 2. So she's ready for this fight. Even as you start, and you just start with the knife, she's well equipped with this, and if you're a familiar player and you've been through the rest of the series, you can handle yourself in the beginning. It doesn't take long to eventually get a gun and start working your way through additional weaponry. But being familiar with the series, you jump right in and you start making your way through, trying to figure out what the heck happened, why is this island now overrun, and why would this guy just let you out? You quickly come across one of the newer characters to the series, Steve. He's a young teenager. He was there on the island already. You end up meeting because he starts shooting at you because he thinks you're one of the zombies. Then he realizes that you're not. Steve. Oh boy, Steve. The voice actor for this character made him a very whiny kid. And I'm sure that was done on purpose to really show his age, right? His maturity level. But man, I had a tough time just dealing with Steve throughout the game. He's not there with you the entire time. You do actually get to play with him through a sequence, very much how you played with Carlos in Resident Evil 3. But oh God, every time he spoke, it really just kind of got under my skin. Now, something that happened much later on, which became such a tease for the remakes of Resident Evil 2 and remakes of other entries, in Umbrella Chronicles and Darkside Chronicles. I believe it was Darkside Chronicles on the Wii, and that ended up on the PS3 as well. You see kind of a different take on it. It becomes an on-rail shooter, and there's another voice actor for Steve, and he is way more bearable and made the character way more enjoyable. I've actually talked to a friend of mine about that character. He loves the character. Me, I'm just on the fence like, oh my God, I just need this guy to go away. But anyway, so we're moving through the game as we normally would, just trying to solve the mystery of what's going on. Obviously, we're just in the assumption of this is Umbrella again, which it is, and we meet the Ashford family. We meet Alfred Ashford, and he too has a squeaky villain voice. Very classic. His laugh is high-pitched. It's actually hysterical when he does it. And he's coming after you, and he's just out of his mind. He's got this long rifle hunting you, and he's just like, you know what, I'm going to put you through some traps, and let's see if you can get through this, you know, make it fun for me, don't die quickly, you know, just a psychotic villain. So he's your main villain as you go through here, and he even unleashes a brand new bioweapon that we haven't seen before. I don't remember the name of these things, but they're these large yellow guys with one arm, but that arm stretches, and it will reach out and stretch to get you and grab a hold of you, and they do a lot of damage. They can kill you very quickly. So when you come across them, you either, you know, if you have space, if you don't have to fight them, maybe it's best save some ammunition because they are going to take a lot of hits. Along the way, you do get a crossbow again, just like in Resident Evil 2. You get the explosive rounds for it, and those work wonderful against these guys, these yellow stretchy arm guys. Takes them out in 1 to 2 hits and they're done. But those are, you know, a weapon that you want to kind of hang on to and save because you don't get a whole lot of ammo with it. Another playthrough with New Game Plus, and when you have things unlocked like infinite ammo, go nuts. Shoot that thing all day long. It's great. It has an explosive effect. It's a lot of fun to use. But you want to conserve your ammo because it's a Resident Evil game, so it's going to be few and far between. Medkits as well, you want to be careful and use your save points frequently. Get the ink ribbons and make sure you save as often as possible, because if you die, you're going back to whatever the last save point you did. There's no checkpoints. It's back to the last save. So depending on how far you went and how brave you were, you may end up regretting it because you may be going back quite a ways. And there's a lot to do in this game. The puzzles are complicated and there's a lot of them. There's a lot of doorways that you want to get through, but you can't just yet, so you're figuring out how to get through that. This game was a pretty long game. When you start reaching what you believe is the end, and it truly does feel like an end, you realize you're only at a midway point. And that blew my mind, because at that point, the game switches over, you move on from playing as Claire, and suddenly, out of nowhere, Chris Redfield from the first game, your hero from the first game, Claire's brother, climbing up the cliffside onto the island, and you're now in control of Chris, and kind of picking up where everything left off on the island. He's seeing kind of the results of any battles that happen and changes that Claire had made along the way. Now, the whole part of the plot that's shrouded in mystery is this Ashford family this time. There's not so much focus on the Umbrella Corporation. You're more focused on this family. There's documents again telling about stories. There's areas of this mansion-like place on the island that's obviously was lived in and owned by that family for many generations. And there's even a puzzle that's involved. It involves the generations and putting them in order and knowing who's who based off of paintings on the wall. I love that puzzle. It was such a great idea, but you need to do your research. You gotta know who is who, and there's information even right in that room. But if you were collecting other documents along your way, you were learning about the Ashford family, so you kind of get a sense of who came first, who is the matriarch, who is the start of everything, and where did this leave off. You find out fairly quick into the game that Alfred is a twin. He has a twin sister. Now, she is missing in action. We see some home movies footage where it's actually kind of, it's supposed to be like, it's got this sweet, like almost lullaby type music, but it's kind of creepy. These kids are sitting there and they put like a dragonfly into a little bin with a bunch of ants, and they pluck off the wings of the firefly and then just watch joyfully as the ants eat the firefly, and it's really strange, it's awkward, it's very creepy, especially because of this like lullaby type music that's going on at that point, and then the theme that it plays is actually redone in multiple ways throughout the game. You find like music boxes and things like that, so it just adds this weird creepy tone. It's like, what's up with these creepy kids, and they're like the white blonde hair, so it's almost like reminiscent of Children of the Corn. It's just really strange. So his sister Alexia is MIA. We don't know what's going on with her, and you basically find out that their father was running some tests, and she was a test subject, and to use this code Veronica virus to incorporate into her. Now, we don't know why he did this, but you know, you start to learn more and more information as you go, and eventually you get to a point where suddenly there's Alexia talking to her brother. You're kind of out in the hallway hiding and looking through a window, and you see Alexia. It's like, okay, all right, now we have an idea of what's going on. She's here in this weird creepy house off to the side of the mansion area. This house is kind of run down, broken down, looks like something right out of the house from Psycho. And you see it up on the hill, even when you first see it, lightning flashes, and it just kind of sets the tone like a classic horror film, which was pretty cool. I really liked that moment when you first come up to that area, because this is kind of a long walkway to get there, and you know, it's just wonderful creepy tone to it. There's a major twist in this game. You know, every game kind of has a bit of a twist, but this was probably one of the biggest ones in the entire franchise. Now, I'll go ahead and say this. I mean, the game's been out for the longest time, but spoiler alert, this is a huge spoiler, so if you have not played Code Veronica and want to play Code Veronica, stop this video now and go play that, and then pick up where we left off. So, spoiler alert. The twist is Alexia does exist. She's frozen after given the Code Veronica virus. Alfred, though, has a split personality, and his split personality is between himself and Alexia. He believes he is her. So this moment that you see her and you think it's her, you quickly find out it's him, because his wig gets left behind after you injure him. And you find out he's cross-dressing very much out of Psycho, and he is both Alfred and Alexia that entire time that you've been playing through the game. So that adds a whole nother creepy element. Man, this guy is out of his mind. That's where the game shifts. Claire and Steve have been through so many traps, so many puzzles, making their way through this island. You even come across Steve's father at a point, who's already been turned to a zombie, and Steve, in order to save Claire, is forced to shoot down his father. And it is a very emotional scene. The voice, though, of Steve kind of kills the moment for me, but at the same point, it's still a very emotional scene. I mean, this kid had to shoot down his father. I mean, he knows that he's dead at this point already. He's a zombie, and he has to do it, but still, how can you know, it's tough. He delays, he hesitates on it, and understandably so. So it's a big moment there. There's a lot of key moments that have emotional heights to it. Even Steve is falling for Claire as we go. I don't remember how old Claire is supposed to be in this game. I just always felt she was much older than him, and to be honest, I feel like she kind of let him on a little bit, but he's falling for her as the game goes. They eventually find their way to the airfield there. They get through a puzzle to unlock a bridge to get out of the way to get this big cargo plane through, and they escape the island. Now, this was after dealing with a whole bunch going on with Alfred and Alexia's father, who's been mutated. You find out Alexia kept him down in a basement, strapped to the wall, chained to it. He's already been mutated. He's got this blindfold on him. He's just this mess of a boss, and you end up fighting him with a sniper rifle, which was really cool. The goal was to hit him in the heart. That was his weak point, to kill him. So you go through this big boss battle, and it's unlike any boss battle we've had in the Resident Evil series, because it goes into first person for that, because we're looking through the scope of the sniper rifle. The guy's letting off this like purple gas, so you can't really see too well, so you got to use this to try to get your shots in. And it's a pretty good boss battle. And you get through all of this, and you get to the plane, you're escaping. You're like, all right, this was a long game so far, and you feel like this is the end. All of a sudden, the autopilot kicks in, and they're just like, all right, well, we're just gonna ride this out, and then they're just exhausted, so they rest, and then it kind of fades out. And you're sort of like, what's going on here? And that's where all of a sudden the game switches to the next scenario, and you're there as Chris Redfield coming to the island to save the day. Claire along the way had sent a message out to him, so to let him know where they're at, and he's finally there. And now you play as Chris, but you're back on the island and dealing with Alfred and the mess that was left behind. That area doesn't go on for crazy long. You get through it and find out that Claire is gone. You meet up with the guy from the beginning that let her out of the prison cell, and it just kind of brings all the pieces together. Eventually you go back to playing as Claire, and now you're somewhere, I don't know if you're in Antarctica, but I think it's Antarctica, and just this frozen area of an old broken down umbrella facility, and you're going through here, and it's a whole nother section of the game, and working your way through and trying to now get yourself through this to survive and fight Alexia, who's now out, and she's awake and using her abilities that the virus has given her. She can kind of telepathically control other bioweapons, and she sends this like giant tentacle thing to go after you, and she's a pretty badass villain, to be honest. The game wraps up fairly nicely. You get Claire and Chris reunited. Steve, he does not make it. He ends up getting infected and becomes a gigantic monster that you have to basically run away from. You don't really have to fight him, you have to dodge him, and he takes a lot of hits along the way, and he falls. He ends up dying, so he doesn't make it into any other entries other than the kind of the retelling in Dark Side Chronicles. But it's an overall wonderful experience. The boss battle at the end, when you're working together, Chris and Claire together, brother and sister finally united. It's a great moment when they do finally unite, and because that's what you've been waiting for since Resident Evil 2. She came to Raccoon City to find her brother, to find out what happened here, where has he been this whole time. So we're finally reunited and working together to defeat this villain. Now, it's been a long time since I played that original release of Code Veronica. The game was re-released and renamed Code Veronica X. This added in an additional segment to the plotline involving Albert Wesker, the villain from the first game. You find out he survived. He survived his encounter with the Tyrant in the first game, but he's gained abilities from that. From that, he was infected with the T-virus, and he's become superhuman and super strong. Now, I feel like I remember him showing up at the very end of the original release and having an encounter with Chris, and it comes out of nowhere. I could be wrong about this. It's been so many years since I played the Dreamcast version of this. But when you get to Code Veronica X, which was the current version of the game that has since been released on multiple consoles, multiple platforms in the same form, Albert Wesker is part of it. Even comes in early in the game and has an encounter with Claire. So it's hard to remember whether or not he even showed up in the original one, but he's a big part of the re-release of the game, which is definitely the dominant version of it. It's definitely, if you're going to play the game, play Code Veronica X. It has the full story, everything is there, and it plays out nice. It's a wonderful connection back to the original, and to find out what happened to Wesker and where he's been that whole time. So that's the version to play. It leaves off with Wesker still surviving. You know, he has his encounter with Chris and tells Chris about how much he hates him and all this, and the revenge he's going to seek on him for everything that's happened before. And they get kind of separated by debris and the whole place falling apart, so that everybody just parts ways. You end up having your battle with Alexia, and she's all mutated into her bug form. You get through that, and then Chris and Claire escape the Antarctic facility, and they kind of set up their plans for taking out the rest of Umbrella, and the game pretty much ends there. It was a long game, very in-depth, very detailed. The surprise that there's a whole nother section to the game and another character to play as was a welcome surprise. It kept the fun going with the game. It's one of those games that you either love it or hate it, I feel like, in this one, because there's a lot of people that for some reason don't really enjoy this one, maybe because it was so long. I love this game. I think it was an incredible entry, and a lot of people got their start with the franchise at that game, with that release on the new console and everything. Kind of brought in a whole new fan base. But I like the game a lot. It's one of those ones that I like to go back and replay every once in a while. I don't replay it as often as I replay parts 1 and 2, but it's one I certainly do enjoy going back to every once in a while, and I highly recommend that entry. After that, the series took another turn. The PlayStation 2 came out, and we got the Outbreak series, which featured online gameplay and online cooperative gameplay. It wasn't a successful entry. There was even a sequel to it, but it really wasn't all that successful. It tried to utilize Ethernet connectivity through the console, but you couldn't really chat with people. There was these pre-done little gestures you could do in the game, and it brought the game back to Raccoon City with separate characters we never played as, and it was just kind of side stories. And as I mentioned earlier, how this was a series that strayed away from numbering their sequels and then eventually went back to it. Well, that's exactly what they did, because eventually Resident Evil 4 came out. But meanwhile, there's been Code Veronica, Survivor 2, Outbreak, and Outbreak 2. So we had these spin-offs. So once Resident Evil 4 was announced, that made it official that Code Veronica was really more of a spin-off, a side story, even though you played as the main heroes. And that's one of the things that I always thought was very strange about that entry. It's like, why wasn't Resident Evil 4 Resident Evil 5? Why couldn't Code Veronica be 4? This, Outbreak and Outbreak 2 feel like side stories because they're just these extra characters that weren't in it before, and it literally is side stories going on while the other events were unfolding in Raccoon City. But Code Veronica was a full main story featuring our main heroes. So I don't know, it bothers me a bit when series kind of do that and stray from the numbered sequels. Just number them. You can have a subtitle also. It could be Resident Evil 4, Code Veronica. Nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. But when we come back to talk about the rest of the series, we'll talk about Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6. I'm going to combine them together as they're very similar styles. I hope you guys enjoyed this talking more into the Resident Evil series. I'll see you next time when we're out of the cave.